Here in the background.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, so this is the other side of the same knife that I did in an earlier video. What we're going to do now is we're going to actually time it from the 600 grit that we ground to on the gator belt, and by then we're going to polish it up to a 1200 grit. So you're going to see how quickly it goes if you did your grinding properly. So the key to your hand polishing is your final grinding. In my estimation, grinding stops at 180, and even whether it's a machine finish or a hand finish, anything further than that is polishing, because your edge thickness should be in there, your final shape should be in there, your bevel should be all the right shape and all trued up and everything from that point on. So everything else after that last 180 grit is polishing, or an aid to your hand polishing. So I don't like polishing. Everybody hates polishing. So what I've done now, obviously, is I've polished it up to a 600 grit on the gator belt. Now the gator belt is a wonderful invention. It grinds very smooth, very even. It actually feels like you're grinding on a cushion. You don't get this or this tock, 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 tock as the little belt joint goes over your blade. It's very smooth, very easy. Makes me look good when I'm actually perhaps not that good. Okay, so what we've done is we spent about 10 minutes over there doing the final grinding on the blade. Now we're over here, we're going to do a hand finish. Now I'm fresh out of 800 grit, so what we're going to do is we're going to go from the 400 to a 600 to a 1200. So I've got a 1200 grit here. Always keep your sandpaper separated, your water paper. So I've got my 1200, I'm going to put aside. I've got my 600, I'm going to put aside. I've got my 400, which I'm going to use now. In fact, I'm not going to use this piece of 400, I'm going to put it back. I'm going to use the other half of this one piece that I used on the other side, and I'm going to use it on this side. I've got soapy water that we just put on the blade. Why soapy water? It tends to keep the grit from the blade and the sandpaper in the fluid, and it aids in the polishing of the blade. So you don't have to sit there when you polish dry. It feels like you're getting nowhere. Got my polishing stick, piece of wood with a piece of leather, with a little chamfered end there, so that this forms a corner so that I can get into the run-ins over here. Okay, and also dip my piece of sandpaper in there, and away we go. Any of you have got a stopwatch? Now's the time. If you're worried about my ricassos or whether I'm going to polish over these nice crisp lines here, what we do is we go back to the gator belt after we've done all this, and we just touch it with that 600 again, and that brings out those nice lines again. Some of the other knife makers use a disc sander to do the same thing. I am not very confident on my disc sander. I am very confident, however, on my my belt sander, and as a result I can get the same effect with the gator belt. Nice clean lines, and those clean lines are even more difficult to get on a flat ground blade because there's less of a contrast between the two surfaces, less of an angle. So now this is the primary polish. I'm seeing where all the deep marks are. So there's some over here, and some near the tip. So that's where I have to focus my efforts. Now this is not like grinding. We're not going to grind away the blade. All we're doing is removing micron upon micron layer. Always moving your sandpaper up a little bit each time. Notice how I've changed my angle. Now it seems like I'm rushing, but I'm not. This is how I polish. I do not like spending more time than necessary polishing. Always keeping it wet. Getting this little corner here now into the run-in. You can actually scoop it if you like and polish it. And that gets it really neat in there. Notice money going one way. Because of the corner you can't do this, it does nothing. So we do it like that, and we continue making sure we get every last little section covered. Make sure you get the tip. Move it up a little bit. Alrighty. So let's wipe it clean. Alright, so I can't see any of the previous. All my grinding marks are gone. I can now move to a 600. Here's a tip: whenever you're cutting your sandpaper, always cut around the part that tells you what the grit is. Many a time I've cut a strip like this and I've cut the 600 off and I've got this piece of sandpaper and I don't know what it is. Don't know whether it's 600 or an 800 or a 400. People claim they can tell the difference, but I've seen that proved wrong many times. So put the 600 aside. Alright, dip it in my paper, in my water. Let's give it a wipe, and now I'll go straight. Actually, I'm not going to go straight, I'm going to go perpendicular to the lines that I've just made. Now more than ever, you need to be aware of keeping the grit fresh. Because if you don't, those marks take a long time to get out. Okay, now when it comes to this little area here where our spine runs, it's difficult to polish this way, otherwise we're going to round it. So we have to just polish straight, just for this section here, so we can get in there and keep it neat. Even though we can fix it mostly with the gaiter belts on the platen, we don't want to have to do that. Okay, now I'm just going to get the tip done. Keeping it fresh, otherwise you're wasting your time if you're just using the same old piece of sandpaper over and over again. It's worth noting that this is not sandpaper, it's water paper. I'm just saying sandpaper so that if there are any novices out there watching, you've got a better idea of what I'm talking about. Alright, so that's up to 600 grit. I'll just clean it off. I cut myself a piece of 1200. I'm cutting a wider piece than I normally do.
Stuart, would you ever go up to 2000?
Yes, you go up to 2000, 2500, even a 5000 if you're after a mirror finish. But mirror finish is a lot of hard work. Personally, I'm not fond of mirror finishes, but a lot of knife makers out there can do an exceptional mirror finish. Now, a mirror finish is a much more difficult thing than just buffing the crap out of your knife. If you buff the crap out of your knife, it looks like it's been chromed. If you do a proper mirror finish, it looks like a mirror. There's a distinct difference, and the only way to tell is if you put the two of them next to each other. For me, this is a 1200 satin finish, which is perfectly acceptable for a using knife. I don't normally even go this high. Normally I only go up to an 800. And now the final part of the polishing we do straight. So whatever increments of grit that you use on your final polishing, always make sure that the last angle that you do finishes horizontally. So you can start 400, 800 or 1200, or if you're going even higher, just work it out in a way that your last grit polishes perpendicular to the edge and the back of the knife. Not perpendicular, parallel. Ignore me, it's hot. Okay, so I've got pretty much a good finish on it now. There's an expression I have in my workshop: don't think you're finished, know you're finished. So always checking your angles to see if you missed anything. So far with this one, so good. Just going over it. So I think I'm finished, which means I should do it at least, go over the blade at least twice more with a piece of paper to make sure it looks neat. So the first of the last two times is just an up and down like I'm doing now. And the last one is to straighten out your lines, make them nice and even and parallel. Okay, now I'm letting the blade dry up. rather than keeping it wet.
How would you tell a client to keep maintain the blade after you've?
Well, generally you won't, because any blade is going to get tarnished, scratched, or damaged. There's no ways you can really keep it neat and tidy. Unless you're a collector, then you're just leaving it in the cupboard, and then it's not a problem. Now, to do my final lines to keep it nice and neat, we're going to take our block of wood with the sandpaper, the water paper, and we're going to do it in single strokes like this. Now, much like it was previously, we move the sandpaper up, but we don't move it up this way, we move it up this way. So now a bit of it's hanging over the edge. There are more techniques to learn while doing this, but that's not the point of this exercise. It's just to show you how to get to this point on your knife. Make your knife look nice and neat. Move it up. Okay, there we go. I'm satisfied with that. Now we take it to the platen. We put it on our magnet. Edge tip down. It's hard to see because of the flat grind, but let's just give it a wipe with my shirt. Here we go, you can see the line is clean again, and this is a perfectly acceptable finish. Alright, I hope you learned something. Thank you very much for watching.